You stand where you want, and I will move this to.
To accommodate me?
That's right.
Am I blocking you?
Do you want me to erase our stuff in the back? Not that it's confidential.
Looks pretty confidential.
No.
Everybody on YouTube will know.
But it's a hot mess.
What's the
so
code?
forget.
What's the code? What does ACE mean?
What is ACE?
They'll be putting on their tinfoil hats.
Am I blocking you guys? If I stand here? No.
Stands for-
So when are you guys planning on taking your test? That's the big kicker.
When are the tests?
Let me tell you. How funny that I wrote that all down. So if you want to go for the spring testing, which is in April, you have to have your application by next week.
Yeah, it's
Like by Monday. So, but I think the summer is doable. If you want to do the summer testing, your application has to be in on June 22nd, and then the testing dates are July 18th through August 1st. So what happens is you make application on Nina's website, and it's is it still $469, Daryl? $469 to
I think so.
apply to test. And what they do is they schedule you at a testing center based on your geographic location. It is a multiple choice, computer generated, 150 question test. I'm telling you guys, if I can pass it with only doing the telephone, I only refreshed on the telephone technical stuff,
What about
and
the
I
radio?
passed the test.
When is this summer?
The summer, you have to apply by June 22nd, and then the testing dates are July 18th through 8/1. They give like a 2-week window, because then they let those testing facilities schedule you through however they're booked up, because they administer other tests too. The fall testing is, the deadline is September 8th, and then the testing is October 3rd through October 17th.
That'll be me. I don't have enough tests. I don't have enough points to sit for the summer one.
You know,
I
not
won't have
yet.
enough points until we take CMCP.
Now, do you retest, Monica, or do you just use the points?
You don't, you only so let me tell you what to do after you test and you successfully get your ENP certification. There is a form online to recertify, and what it tracks really is your activities as a NINA member, whether you've attended a course, you participate in a chapter, you participate in a state committee, you teach. You don't necessarily have to teach NINA curriculum. So all of the kind of stuff like you're doing, Holly, even Rayleigh, all of the stuff you guys do to teach to bring education to your staff, or even if you invite other agencies, you can write articles for the call, for the publication. You can participate on a national level committee. There's a lot of different categories for you to gain points over a 4-year period. And then your recertification is $300, because I just did it.
You said the documentation, you do all that in,
It's on
Nina
Nina's
site?
website, yeah. The application is online, and then the recertification.
Yeah, and what I do is, I got the, you can download a PDF of the recertification form,
Yeah.
and once a month, I just go and put everything on there, and, let's see, my first one was 2005, and I renewed in 2009, and I just renewed the second time. And both times, I got all the points I needed within like the first year and a half
Yeah.
of the 4 years.
It's
If you
real
write
easy.
everything down, so once a month, that way I don't forget anything. I just go in and write it down.
Like I teach emergency dispatch now at CMU, so that counts towards education credits, but it's not a NINA activity. So it doesn't have to be a NINA focused thing to get points, and the points are really easy to, I think they give you 4 years because initially it looks a little daunting, but like Daryl said, even I had my points probably in the first 2 years. You get credit for attending conferences, you get state conference, regional conference, national conference, it's all, but it's easy. So I encourage you, you will never have to retest if you continue to keep your recertification up.
So don't do what Carl did.
I was gonna say, wasn't it Carl?
Carl, let this go. And then you have to go back through all this pain again. So, anyway, just a little tidbit. So, take it this year while the material's still fresh in your head, seriously. So we're winding down, I think we have 2 modules left to teach, and I have the exciting comp and benefits, employee and labor relations, and health and safety. So we're looking for an HR person to share this exciting topic with you guys, and tag Monica's it. So, how long, what's the management experience in here? Remind me again. How many years have you been in supervision? Robert, how many years have you been in supervision?
I want to say 11 years.
One.
Here or ever?
Ever, supervisor anywhere. I'm sorry, say 6? How about you, Raven?
9.
So we got like 40 years of supervision. How many of you have ever worked in labor, with a organized labor union personnel? Have you ever dealt with any of your staff's compensation and benefits? In what way?
We did like some disability stuff.
Help them process disability paperwork? Okay. So what this segment is really about is like the meat and potatoes. So when you really start to define a job, you start out by doing an analysis and create a job description. Do you have a description for all of your assignments in your comm center, from the dispatcher or call taker up to the manager or to Mike's position to executive director?
Yes.
Yeah, and the newer one, so I encourage you to get one done for any that you don't have. And typically what happens when you conduct a job analysis, you have somebody from a human resource environment come and sit with and compare duties. They follow around an employee, if you will, to see what their tasks are throughout the day and how like those tasks may be aligned with other job descriptions they have in their categories. Whether it's a clerical kind of function, and I'm going at this from a very generic perspective, not so dispatch centric, to create the job description. You know, and a job description has things like the tasks that you're supposed to do, or that the job entails, the qualifications, especially as it might pertain to lifting, physical requirements, education requirements, training requirements, any of those kinds of things that you may be asking that employee must be or should be included in a job description. Because when you go to take any kind of legal action with that employee, if you do not have a description, a legal description for their job, it makes your efforts very hard. Because really there's nothing defining the duties and responsibilities that that individual has. Pay rates setting pay rates kind of happens in a similar fashion. The way the city of Grand Junction does it, I'll approach it from a private sector, my private sector experience with aircraft, and the way the city of Grand Junction does it. So once they have this job description, and they figure out what kind of category of work it is, if it's labor, office kind of setting, then they do like a market study. So in the state of Colorado, there is a collective of the mountain states, blah, 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 mountain states, what's the EC? Anyway.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. But there is a collective of human resource departments in the state of Colorado and actually in this whole mountain region. And they collaborate on human resource data and they do a market comparison. They will take job descriptions from our part of the state and compare them with your part of the state to see how far off or where we should be setting the pay range bar. And then they take things into consideration such as cost of living, how's expensive a house over here, you know, those kinds of things to help set a attractive pay rate. What kinds of things do you think are categorized as compensation and benefits?
Salary,
Okay, salary,
healthcare.
healthcare. vacation and pension, yeah. Sick leave, time for if you get jury duty service. Are you guys on a paid time off collective of your vacation time, or is it, or do you have separate buckets for your time off? Meaning, so, we're under a practice that actually my former private sector employer had, which was called a paid time off bank. We didn't have a delineation of vacation time, sick time, jury service time, holiday time. We had one bucket of time. Is that how you guys are here?
How we're
All
separate.
All separated out. So there's arguments, pros and cons both ways. And I think still across the country, it's a 50-50 split. I think very much in union shops, you find that there's still a very distinct delineation between how time off is accrued, accumulated, and accounted for, because the unions prefer that methodology. Do you think that, like all your short-term disability, your long-term disability insurance, EAP is a benefit, right? All of those things qualify as part of your compensation and benefit package. I kind of have talked on philosophies and strategies. When you're trying to, again, if you're trying to craft job description, when you're creating, you guys were actually a great case study for this, creating a new organization, you had some real opportunity to reevaluate what your job descriptions look like. Philosophically, what was your focus of the organization? What service are you providing? All of those kinds of things play into the development of that. And I don't know if they just merged all of the old centers documents or came to some kind of agreement, or you're still probably maybe working through some of that. Am I right? Or, yeah. So think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that as you're moving forward. We kind of talked about economic factors and compensation and benefits. Everything plays into it. The social economics makeup of the area that your business you're providing resides in, the segment of the country, it's geographic, it's political, it's all of those things have some factor in our compensation and benefits and how well we're paid or not paid. All of us have been to national conferences. We have people who make $9 an hour still at this job, who I think are absolutely crazy. And we have people who are compensated well, like we are. Like I think our top went to 25.65 in January for our dispatchers. What's your proficient top
Our
rate?
top is higher than that.
That's good. That's good, because I need something to keep climbing to.
It's like 28-ish.
Oh, good.
Yeah, honestly.
I think overall, Colorado actually compensates dispatchers fairly well. I don't know if I could speak to the same in the very remote areas, but overall, I think we do a much better job than some of the other states in how we offer benefits and compensation.
And this is something I look at every year in the state of
Yeah.
911 report too, and it varies widely across the state, but when you look at Colorado as a whole state compared to other states, we usually rank about 7th or 8th in highest pay for dispatchers. So we're not the Cadillac, but maybe the BMW.
But we're in the top fourth of the whole country's pay rate.
Right.
So to me, that's something to brag about to your folks. And if you have never looked at the State of the 911 report that Daryl puts together each year, that's a great resource. And we actually share the data with our staff to show them how well they're compensated, because he has a lot of good wage information in there. Small center versus medium-sized center versus small center data. That's really kind of a nice comparison for you to look at. So I really encourage you to look at that.
I think one thing to add to that's a factor is the competition around here too.
Absolutely.
Weimar County next door.
And your human resource organizations are doing the same thing. They're even though we're government entities, they're still looking to see what is the draw, what is pulling people away from our jobs, or vice versa. If the private sector was having how do we stay competitive in the market? They absolutely 100%. In the aircraft industry, in the private sector, when I was in it, so I worked for McDonnell Douglas for 15 years. our big three that we analyzed was Boeing, Lockheed, and Rockwell. That is who we compared salaries with, because we were all four national companies. We performed similar functions, and we could find very similar job classifications across all four corporations. So we made sure that we remained competitive, because when you don't, people start stealing your people very easily, right? And then pay adjustments and increases. In the government world, those are voted on by our elected officials for cost of living raises or market rate adjustments in our case. I'm sure a similar process happens in your county. Do you know what that is?
Our commissioners approve.
Commissioners, county commissioners, does Mike submit that for you as a cost of living kind of thing? Does he do it annually? Does he do a market study to compare economically what's happened in the community to see what your cost of living increase should be?
I think that he does a market study, but it goes into, because it's a countywide
It's an
cohort,
entire
Oh,
so
okay.
it just goes
Yeah.
towards
Gotcha.
the entire thing.
So probably the county probably gives him some data too about what's happening.
I think Mike does as far as the actual pay for a dispatcher, and then the cost of living is with the county.
Oh, okay, perfect. So you guys are kind of getting a dual benefit. Yeah, so in the city of Grand Junction, for the last 5 years, we have not got any cost of living raises. We've gotten market rate adjustments. So they claim they factor in the cost of living, but when we do the math, we don't necessarily see that. But we've had such a boom and bust again with the whole oil field in our part of the state. It's been very challenging. Any more questions about this? Clear as mud? Pretty simple. It's really pretty simple. And remember, this segment of material that I'm presenting you only represents 25% of test questions. Actually, probably less than that. It's probably more like 20%. So of 150 questions, you're only gonna have 1 or 2 questions that could be related to the 3 topics that I'm sharing with you today, right? Employee and labor relations. So let me share with you in your little book, I'm not gonna go real far into it. In the back, under section 6, under tab 6 is where all of the labor laws and some of the acts are identified or
You have
spelled out for
tabs.
you.
We don't have tabs.
You don't have tabs?
Page 147.
47.
Okay, thanks.
And I covered a lot of those in one of the previous sections
Perfect.
too.
I will just share with you that you don't need to memorize them, but just be familiar with them, because I actually had, I think, 2 test questions related to that legal mumbo jumbo. So, employment relations. Do you have a personnel policy manual? Is it county or is it Weld County Communications Center?
We have our county code, and that covers most of the legal stuff.
Like sexual harassment, drug usage, how people are disciplined, whether they have rights to an appeal if they're terminated, that's all under your county.
The performance
Yeah.
process, yeah.
So when we're talking about employment relations, policies and practices, that's what they're talking about. Whether or not you have a right to appeal, like in our jurisdiction, an employee who is fired, first they can go to their department head, and if they're not satisfied, they can go to the city manager, and the city attorney will obviously advise the city manager. But they are entitled to one shot to make their case. What other kinds of things are covered in policies, city or county employment manuals, or even private sector employment manuals for that matter?
Start with pages.
Dress codes can be covered in there.
Yeah, we usually.
All of your leave policies, all of them.
Bereavements.
Bereavement, yeah, anything like that. When we start talking about employment rights and privacy, there's all of this legal mumbo jumbo. Harassment legislation, affirmative action plans, workers' comp benefits, unemployment compensation laws, and Social Security. You know, most of the time, very few of us ever deal with those things. We call the subject matter experts or human resource departments, right? It was very interesting for me in the state of California in the private sector, the supervisor, the line level supervisor, actually represented the company in employment hearings with the EEOC. That was crazy, that was crazy. I actually appeared in two because again, we had union labor. That was very interesting. What we said determined whether they could collect unemployment, depending on the type of hearing we were at. State of Colorado is a right to work state, right? So they are not just automatically qualified for unemployment, right?
Right.
It doesn't get, the test questions don't get that specific, but. So let's talk about labor management relationships. Union representation of employees means exclusive bargaining representation of workers in a particular group. So, my specific example that I could give you, UAW, United Automotive Workers, for whatever reason, the great big UAW was able to convince the feds when they created the labor organization that aircraft workers, mechanics, installers qualified under their definition of the United Auto Workers description. So they were able to become a part of that union. That used to be, and maybe still is, one of the most powerful unions in the country, although most of the unions have pretty much lost a lot of their oomph. So what did that mean? That meant every month, as a union, when you hired into the company in certain job classifications, you had to agree to become a union member or you didn't get the job. So every month, union dues came out of your check. You had labor representation by a disciplined employee. So the mechanics on my crew, there was a mechanic who was a union labor rep who would represent them at any employment or discipline hearings. So those dues that you paid to the organization entitled you to that kind of representation. I never collected on mine. It's kind of a bummer. It's kind of important to make the differentiation here because union representation and collective bargaining are two different functions. Collective bargaining is the process of negotiating between an employer and a group of employees aimed at reaching agreement to regulate working conditions. So the union would go into collective bargaining during contract negotiations to improve working conditions, whether that meant more paid time off, better wages, another cost of living, better shift differentials, all of those kinds of things that qualified as improving their work environment. That process of negotiating that is called collective bargaining. Get that? How many of you know dispatchers who are union? They mostly are populated on the East Coast because like our public safety partners, anything east of the Mississippi is almost all union because that's where the unions in this country were born. The law enforcement unions are strong there, the firefighter unions are strong there. So then when the world of dispatching happened to support them, dispatchers there became unionized. When you start heading west, that practice becomes less and less. They're not unionized in California, are they?
I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah.
Now, 2 jobs ago, I was a supervisor at a call center in Wisconsin, and they were unionized.
Yeah.
Which was a new experience for me, but
It's a different beast.
and you tend to see it more in larger departments than smaller ones. So I was kind of actually surprised that Denver wasn't because,
Yeah.
you know, their fire department is, and their police department is, but their dispatch center is not. So that was kind of a surprise to me just because of the size of the department. Usually that's where you see the unions at.
Yeah.
There was talk of us doing that with Greeley, and the Greeley Police Union, I don't think wanted to touch dispatch with a 10-foot pole,
Yeah.
so.
So be thankful for that. And maybe I should qualify that statement, you know. Obviously, there are good reasons for union representation. I think some of those reasons don't exist like they used to in our working environment 40 years ago when we really didn't exist back then. Do I think that employers still take advantage of employees? Absolutely. And I can stand up here and say that with a straight face as a manager of a comm center. We do things that maybe we shouldn't sometimes. And perhaps union representation for that employee wouldn't allow us to cross that line maybe so often.
I brought this up when I talked about the management, gave the management section too. I think from a manager's point of view, the way to think, if you're not in a unionized shop, if you treat your employees well, they'll never want to unionize. It's not something you have to worry about. If they're already unionized, then it's just something you have to deal with,
Right.
because usually when the union comes in, it doesn't leave.
Right.
So you have to go through the collective bargaining and work with all of the union, the representation during disciplinary hearings and things like that. But then if you're just doing things, you cross all the T's and dot all the I's and make sure that you have documentation on every disciplinary action like you would anyway, then you're usually covered there as well.
Absolutely. But Daryl hit it on the head. You pretty much, if your shop is union when you go in, you're pretty much probably you're not making it go away. But if you don't have it, the key to keeping it out is to keep your employees happy, treating them fairly. When they ask for stuff and it's a legitimate request, give it to them. Anything that's within your power. So, there's this really cool thing called the National Labor Relations Act. So, it really helps keep employers in check. And I didn't, it is a very lengthy piece of legislation, and I've got just a few bullet points that are covered. Under this act, employees have the right to attempt to form a union. As a management team, you cannot deny them that right. They have that right under this federal legislation. It also has protected activities. 2 or more employees addressing an employer about improving their pay or improving their workplace conditions. You cannot take action against employees who approach us, and I'll use us as the collective, to improve their wages, their working environment. You cannot retaliate against them for doing that. They are protected by this Labor Act, just to be able to do those functions. Oopsie, I went too far. Oh, I guess I only put those 2 things. I didn't put a lot about this. You can't mistreat employees anymore. Just don't do it.
Retaliation lawsuits.
Yeah, I mean, and they are federally protected. I mean, just don't do it. Find legitimate ways to find compromise and work through the issues, and, they understand, people are not, idiots. If you don't have $10,000 to increase their wages, they get it. If you explain the budget process to them, that you have to request an increase for wages, explain the process to them. If they're already comparatively paid well, show them that. They got it pretty good here. If they're making that kind of money, you guys are paying your people very well. Plus they make overtime on top of that. So if they're making close to $30 an hour, and if they're making time and a half for overtime, they're making $40 an hour, $45 an hour on overtime. That's a lot of money. That would really fund my shopping habits. Okay.
Do you want to talk about the difference between a closed and open shop?
I can't.
Okay.
Would you like to?
So this will vary depending on what state you're in, what kind of rules they have for unions. In some states, particularly in the East Coast where unions are stronger, talking about Wisconsin, Michigan, places like that, you'll find what are called closed shops. A closed shop union is one where you have to join the union when you start working there.
Right. So my example.
Yours was a closed shop. A lot of states have passed laws making closed shops illegal. Those are open shop states where if you go to work someplace where there's a union, it's up to you whether you want to join or not. If you don't join, then you're not going to get representation at your disciplinary hearings and so forth, but you don't have to pay the dues. And a lot of times people will get in a position where suddenly they're facing some sort of disciplinary action. They go, I want to join the union now. And then the union says, no, sorry, you have to have been a union member for X number of months before you're eligible for any sort of representation.
Yeah.
I don't know if the difference between open and closed shops will show up on the exam, but it's something that if you want to work in another state, it would be handy to know that difference.
And, speaking to Wisconsin and Michigan, again, think about where the industry was when unions were popular. The automotive industry, the East Coast for police and fire, steel workers, those are the places where the birthplace of most of the unions in this country, because the working conditions were total crap. The coal unions, those guys were all mystery.
One of the things the unions will complain about with open shops is the problem of free riders. So they go in and they do collective bargaining to get pay increases for everyone in the department. It can't be just pay increases for the union members, it's pay increases for everybody. But if only 25% of the employees there are union members and they're paying dues, then all the others are getting the pay increase for basically nothing.
Yeah.
And that was a problem in the first place I worked at. I admit I was a free rider because we had 35 employees in the first dispatch center I worked in, and 3 of them were union members. It was an open shop.
Yeah. Was that in New Mexico?
No, that was Missouri.
Missouri?
Mhm.
Interesting. Any more questions about this? I guess these really didn't ask questions. So, strikes. So I was actually present when we had strikes. So strikes are something that represented employees work together to create a work stoppage to hold that as leverage over the employer. So you can imagine the chaos that can create. Ours was a production environment, so we ended up falling behind in scheduled, committed delivery dates. Huge penalties from the airline, although they did negotiate clauses into the airline purchasing contracts that if we had union strikes, blah, 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 our penalties would be assessed at a different rate, blah, 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 blah. But strikes are organized work stoppages by the union. Boycotts are just acts of voluntarily abstaining from something, whether it's abstaining from an activity, buying something, doing something. That's what a boycott is. So it was interesting to me they wanted to differentiate between the two. A strike is an actual work stoppage by whatever the organization is. A boycott is something we do individually. I mean, you can cross the picket line in a strike, but usually your hardcore union brothers and sisters don't take too kindly to that.
Are dispatchers allowed to strike? Depends on the state. Most states, though, have laws on the books saying that emergency workers are not allowed to strike, so it kind of depends on whether they classify 911 call takers as emergency workers, which they really are.
Right.
But in most states, police officers are not allowed to strike. So in New York, if you've been watching the news and you see the tension between the New York Police Union and the mayor's office there, they're not allowed to strike. What they have been doing is an unofficial work slowdown, where they just don't issue as many tickets and things like that.
Which of course has a huge impact on the city's revenue, as we all know.
Right.
They can still impact it, but
But they can't officially
they
strike.
can't.
That's great.
All right.
Just not answer the phone.
We actually had the Teamsters, so a portion of our workers were also Teamsters at our plant.
Aren't the UAW is the Teamsters, isn't it? Or is it a separate
It's
thing?
a separate, they're actually separate organizations, but they partner together
Gotcha.
a lot. And we actually broke the Teamsters, but it was painful. I mean, we had supervisors who were retaliating, because obviously your supervision structure is not union, because then it becomes a conflict of interest between the corporations or the company's mission and what the employees are doing.
That's how it is with grading PPE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So supervision generally is not a union member. They had to allow us to start parking inside the plant because our cars were getting vandalized. People were making threatening motions or, chest bumping, physically threatening supervisors. It was who had a bomb under her car. It was really exciting.
You get a little testosterone driven.
Yeah, it does. It gets kind of crazy. The last thing we're going to talk about is health and safety. What kind of environmental factors do we have in our centers that are an impact to an employee's health and safety?
Close quarters.
Close quarters, maybe.
All the equipment.
The equipment. We're sedentary.
Shift work,
Shift work has an impact.
stress.
Stress, the keyboard, keying all day long and not having proper ergonomic chairs, keyboard adjustment capabilities. Are we having an occupational therapist come in occasionally and evaluate the work environment to see what kind of improvements we can make? Those are environmental factors to me. You can, so when we moved into our new center and bought our new furniture, I had an occupational therapist come in and evaluate how our employees were sitting at their workstation. And I don't know about you, and I'm about to go out of the picture, most of us sit up on the edge of our seat. Have you ever paid attention to that? Like, we're ready to launch into the computer screens. And I don't know if it's just the natural, our body trying to process all of that adrenaline, but we're like, when she was done evaluating all 50 of us, because we all actually sat down, sat where we typed, she observed us typing, how high did we have the platform, did we have the monitors at the right height, were we sitting properly in our seat? She goes, none of you sit right. You all look like you're about to just jump out of your seat. I mean, I bought back supports. We had to try to retrain everybody to sit back in their seat properly. All of those things are part of our environment, but have a huge impact. The number one claim that we've had for our workman's comp claim is carpal tunnel. So your agency can spend a lot of money on carpal tunnel claims, and probably validly, if we're not doing the things that we need to be doing to protect them in their work environment. So the other thing they did for us was gave us little exercises that you could do with little bands and little balls. So I bought all of that. You know, it's $20. It doesn't cost anything, but the payoff in the long run is if you discount one workman's comp claim, you've more than recovered your money for the equipment, because workman's comp claims can be very costly.
About hearing.
Hearing, absolutely. Do you give your new employees a hearing test?
No.
So we do. We used to not go back and do rechecks. We've implemented it. I wanted to do 3 years, HR said 5 years, so I've compromised for right now. But I am pushing to do a 3-year retest. Because think about the noise. They put their headset, we have all those different kind of headsets, right? You can put the foam cushion on the outside of your ear, you can put the thing clear down in your ear. And there's radio squeals, there's people yelling, there's siren noises, all of that stuff is like working on an aircraft flight line. And it will degrade our hearing over a period of time. But if we can do things to help mitigate that by testing their hearing on a regular basis and trying to adjust volumes and have other ways to mitigate that noise, we can help them keep their hearing longer, because it is going to diminish over time.
So if you hire somebody who, we don't do hearing tests, so if we don't know that they have a hearing problem and they don't disclose that to us, and then 6 months down the road they say, you know what, I can't hear, I can't do my job, I'm filing for disability
You might have a hell of a time proving that it wasn't caused by this job.
by the job.
Yeah. Because the very function of what we do impacts their hearing.
That's all.
So you're kind of exposed there a little bit, Robert, I'll just say that.
Every dispatch center I've worked for required a hearing test. And the last dispatch center, I had a hearing test even though I was the manager.
Yeah.
But we tested everybody who came in. And I don't want to give the impression that these are always make-believe problems. People really do get hearing problems from working in dispatch, and people really do get carpal tunnel. But what you will notice is that a lot of times when one person gets carpal tunnel, then suddenly it's like it's contagious. Everybody in the department starts getting it because they start thinking about,
Right.
oh my gosh, I'm thinking about my hands hurting, so now they hurt. Or I'm thinking about my hearing going bad, so now I think my hearing's going bad. Carpal tunnel is a little bit harder to monitor, but if you have a baseline for what their hearing was when they started, and you can do a hearing test after they make a claim, you can show whether there's a significant decrease or not.
And then you can really, if you're doing that initial testing, you have something like, Daryl, you have something to measure to. Because we can actually prove how many decibels are coming into their ear through the earpiece. They could test that and give us a reading with a device.
Plus, we had a rash of officers with some attitude issues that like to squelch on the radio.
There you go.
You know,
Yeah. I will share with you too, we take a vision test and a color blindness test. Why do you think I do a color blindness test? Absolutely.
Well, your alerts and stuff.
And you know when, I didn't start doing that till about 4 years ago, and there is a recruiting company in the state of Washington who was doing a session at Navigator in Maryland, whenever they were there last, that's where I did it, that goes, oh my God, how come you're not checking for color blindness? I'm like, he goes, don't your dispatchers have to be able to discern between the colors? I said, they don't have to. The color enables them to find things more quickly. He goes, but will that make them more effective in their job if they can see the color? I said, I never even thought of that. So wham bam, we do the color test now. We don't disqualify people, but I have yet to have even tested anybody that has a color blindness issue. But we do administer the test.
So you do hearing tests, vision tests, and then the regular drug testing. Do
Yeah.
poly.
We actually do CVSA, the computer voice stress analysis test. It's the new technical version of the old polygraph.
And do you administer that yourself?
No, we have our professional standards units do it. You can a civilian can get certified to administer the CVSA. I don't know what the requirements are for a polygraph, I never investigated that. But I have to think a civilian can administer a polygraph. You just have to go get certified. What do you guys know about critical incident stress management?
That it's important?
That's very
Isn't that been like kind of the hum word in our business for probably like the last 5 years? Because guess what? They finally figured out that stuff impacts us as much as it does the first responders. So again, it's about our employees' health and well-being and us putting the proactive things in place to make sure that we don't have somebody go into a full, PTSD meltdown in the middle of their foot pursuit or vehicle pursuit while they're monitoring the PD channel, right? Because if somebody can articulate that employee was demonstrating symptoms and we didn't do anything about it, and they've been demonstrating those symptoms for 6 months, and I knew why Sally was bawling sitting at her console, she couldn't keep it together, every time somebody went boo, she cracked, or, the refrigerator door was left open and she went to pieces. Those are all indicators, and if we're not now, because this has become we're aware of it, we're responsible for doing something about it. So it's another opportunity, and that's probably a poor choice of words, it's another avenue for somebody to make a claim that we didn't provide them the tools to manage their stress, because now we're aware. Do you guys have an employee assistance program? What kind of things do they offer?
Actually, surprisingly, it seems like this particular one offers more than the
They,
one with grade
yeah,
more
they
involvement
offer
with
free
the-
counseling sessions. You get a certain number per
Event, probably?
event or issue.
Yeah.
Like 2 or 3.
Whether it's personal or job related.
Yeah.
They do a lot of referrals to different types of counseling based on, what's going on.
We found out last year one of our employees was having some unfortunate financial disasters, personal. They were gonna have to file bankruptcy, lose their home. Our EAP even offers free financial counseling. I didn't even know that.
That's what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
I think
some
ours does.
interesting things now.
Yeah, and it's, to me, it's kind of important for us to stay on top of that, and I said last year, I was like, oh, boo on me, I didn't even know we offered that. So I encourage you to reach out to your human resource rep, whoever that is your liaison, and find out what are the benefits that they can get. And when you're sitting down in your one-on-ones with your employees and go, hey man, did you know you could get this? I would do it, because if we don't know it, they surely don't know it, because we know most of the time more than they do about our organization's benefits. So, I have yet to see in today's world an organization that doesn't have some kind of employee assistance program. They're pretty standard now, but it's interesting now the variety of services that employees are being offered through them, because employees are getting that. Employees spend the majority of their time with them. So unfortunately, we then have to deal with their life challenges, because their life challenges impact their productivity at work. So, questions, comments?
I think that, and maybe you guys will agree, that we're in a pretty good spot. It's been a rough, probably 6 to 8 months around here, and just from an incident perspective. And our dispatch force is fairly new. The percentage of them haven't been here that long, and so they're taking a brunt of these terrible incidents that have happened. And, I think we're doing better now than maybe we ever have as far as, instant debriefings.
Good.
Just support from the entire management team, and so I think we're all more aware of what options we do have for our staff than maybe we've, ever been,
Even with our trainees in the academy, I mean, it's, by the time they actually hit the floor, they probably had a good 3 or 4 conversations on just mental health
Right.
and what to do and the support
Good.
behind it.
You guys are doing everything right, and just even up front, how many of us how much anxiety did we have when we were training to do this job? Oh my God, and there were none of the tools that we have today when we were going through the mess, right? I mean, there just weren't. It was like, I got thumped in the head once. I was like, oh my God, what kind of place have I come to work for? It's like, oh, I'm 34 years old and you're thumping me in the head like I'm 2. My grandmother didn't even do that to me. But it's that, so just remember, in your role as a supervisor, you're the first line of defense. Just having that conversation. It doesn't mean every employee is gonna reach out and go to the employee assistance program, but you're checking on them. You're checking on their anxiety and their training process, and keep an eye on them when you have a critical incident, and checking in with them on a regular basis. So that's what ensures the health and safety of your employee.
It is amazing how much has changed.
It is very amazing. Even just in the workforce in general, not just in our industry, but the recognition of how an employee's life is impacted and how they bring that to work. There's been a real shift in the last 25 years in how employee management, supervision, or company relations are, and the recognition that without the guy with his feet on the ground, you ain't doing nothing. The
Right.
company's not moving forward, whether you're delivering a service, whether you're manufacturing a product. It's the little guy at the bottom of the chain that makes the most difference, and you have to keep them on their A game. And your investment in these kinds of things to help them do that costs you way less than them having a meltdown. Here's an example. 1991, this kind of stuff did not exist, even in the private sector. We had a layoff. So in the factory I worked in, 53,000 employees. So city of Grand Junction size, really. We laid off people on Fridays by the thousands. And we just called it, here comes the pink slips, because it was a duplicate form, and they would get the bottom pink form. So here comes the pink slips. And as supervisors, we hated it. As union employees, they knew how they went, because they went in seniority date order. It wasn't a selective, Monica's doing a good job, so I'm gonna keep her, Robert's doing a bad job, so I'm gonna lay him off. It was very regimented, it was very organized. So everybody knew who was gonna be laid off. We had employees, Well, let's see, I was the youngest supervisor, but I had people who were old enough to be my grandfather that I supervised. So really in the aircraft manufacturing world, the workforce rotated with where the contracts were at. So these guys have been working since World War II. They've been making big money, union dollars, for years. They were the sole provider for their families in most cases. So when they started getting laid off, it was a huge deal. And in Long Beach, California, we had a huge influx of Vietnamese, from back in the late 80s, and Cambodia, from the boats that came over, from all of that whole Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam turmoil. So in the Vietnamese culture, the young man is responsible to take care of his whole family. Parents, cousins, brothers, sisters, and their families. That's their culture. And we had a young guy on our crew, and when he got his pink slip, he went in the bathroom and shot and killed himself. Because now he was, in his eyes, he could not provide for his family anymore. It's a big deal. It's just different. The whole work world is different to me. It's much better than it used to be.
I'll tell you something that's really become a hot topic in this area just in the last, I'd say the last 4 to 5 years, is bullies.
Bullies, yes, oh my God.
As managers and supervisors, you have to do something about it. I think the old thing used to be, okay, they'll work it out between themselves. It's not we'll just stay out of it. I remember the first dispatch center I worked at, this was 18 years ago. Like a month before I started, a woman, one of the dispatchers, female dispatcher, took a fire call from a woman who was really intoxicated and was just able to call 911 to tell us that her house was on fire. And it was fully involved by the time she called us. And she died while the fire truck was on the way. And she heard this on the phone. She was extremely upset about it. Of course, back then, no CISM, no EEAP, nothing. And I had absolutely no idea that backstory, but her birthday was the next month. The guy they gave the money to, they all took a collection to go get a cake. The guy they gave the money to, he got her a cake with flames on it that said, "Happy Birthday, Scorch." Nothing ever happened to him. If that happens in centers today, somebody better do something about it.
Yeah.
You cannot harass people like that. You cannot treat people like that. This job's hard enough.
Yeah.
So I'm real big on that. The bullying stuff maybe used to be acceptable. It's not anymore.
And I'm glad you said it like a hot button, because I talked about critical incident stress managers. It's the hot topic for us. But so is bullying in the bigger social world that we live in. And it's totally unacceptable anymore that we would allow that kind of activity in our workplace. And as supervisors, you cannot afford to allow that to happen, because then you get into things like harassment law. Your center will be paying out some huge dollars if that employee brings a suit against you, because you've stood by and done nothing while that activity happened. Remember, you're the first line of defense for that, especially the first line supervisors. That's good that you brought that up.
There was a class in APCO in New Orleans that was a bullying class,
Yeah.
and it was extremely eye-opening to what is considered bullying.
Yeah.
Stuff that I probably would have just thought, you're kind of being a jerk, but really, when you look at it,
Well, think about, okay, we kind of all, like I hired in 15 years ago. Robert, you said how many years?
About 20.
25. When we hired in, it was okay for somebody to thump me in the head. Oh, okay, really? No, it's not. But we allowed it because our culture, think about the personality types that make up dispatchers, first of all. We're a lot of type A, oh my God, I do it right, don't you dare tell me anything different. And that's what we attract, and that's like the most explosive personality you can keep in these no window, no door environments, and you can't let them up out of their space, they can't get away. But you can't, but we have treated each other like crap from inception. And only now, really in the last couple of years, have you seen, like even at our national conferences, at the organizations that have, the training organizations, are they trying to teach us to be kinder to one another? Because at the end of the day, nobody deserves to be spoken to, thumped in the head. Those are extreme circumstances, but the very simple things that you're probably referring to. Emails, absolutely.
Just-
And
Second
shouty capitals, you know,
DORs.
DORs,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, snarky comments that you really just kind of
Absolutely.
pass by and.
Yeah,
Well, think about it, you work with them every day, so even the little stuff over time, if repeated. So when it comes to the manager, you know, it may seem petty to you, it's like, so-and-so looked at me weird. What's the backstory here? What's been going on for months
absolutely.
that they haven't told you about that's led up to this point?
Yeah,
Say what, that's a hot topic with us, even with our trainees, you know, our brand new ones. Making sure, because we're hearing others in the room are observing, you know, that trainer is not treating that trainee very well, but the trainee's not coming forward. So we had a whole, last week, we had to address it as constructively as possible, trying to just make it safe for the trainee if there was truly an issue. But that, I mean, that's one of those things too, with the brand new people afraid to say anything, making sure that they're being treated.
yeah, absolutely. They just hired into a well-paying job that they wanna keep. And what has happened to people in the past, as soon as they start making a complaint, they're on probation, really,
Yeah.
right? You're out, I'm done with you.
Or at least their fear is that that's what's gonna happen.
Absolutely, I'm not saying that we did it, but you're right,
Yeah.
I'm saying that's, the
Their
fear in
mind.
their mind is that, exactly, so you have to, sounds like you took action, and hopefully you're praising the employee that came forward who was not the training officer, to say thank you for bringing it, because even though we tell our trainees to bring us that information, they're oftentimes too intimidated too. They're afraid to say anything, and I don't blame them, so everybody else has a responsibility to look out for them too, so. Helpful?
Very.
Simple concepts. Only about 20% of your test questions come from these topics, so don't, but it's easy stuff. If you think of it with your supervisor cap on, you can very easily answer the question. Remember, the test is multiple choice. You can do it.
And you've probably noticed too, there's a lot of overlap from Monica's presentation today to the one I did on management, and the one that Carl did last session on employee selection. You know, there's a lot of overlap there, and that's because all the HR stuff really fits together. You can't really talk about one without the other.
Yeah.
But hopefully that'll help cement it too in your memories, because there will be some of that on the test, obviously.
Yes, there is. Don't ignore it, because there are questions on there about it. Well, thank you guys for your attention.
Thank you for making the
Thank
trip.
Yeah, my pleasure. I've been as passionate about this ENP work group stuff as Daryl has, and at least we finally got it off the ground, and we've even just come up with a plan how to refresh the material every year, and we want more ENPs in the state of Colorado.
That's right.
We're working on
So
it.
I wanna hear commitments from you guys when you're gonna take the test.
Probably summer for me. Fall.
Try summer.
Go for it. You will be amazed at what you already know. I think sometimes I have to tell you, when somebody first started talking to me about this test, I was so intimidated. I was like, oh my God, I'm not smart enough to take that test. And I'm reminding you all again.
So what happens if you fail the first time? What's it cost?
Do you
to
get
retake?
Do you get it?
It is, it's a couple hundred
It's
dollars.
it's
Yeah.
expensive. Yeah. It's
You don't have to pay full
Yeah.
price to take it again.
You get a discount.
You do get a discount to retake it, but I gotta tell you, I think it's an 80% pass.
70.
It's 70. You only have to get 70% right to pass.
That's easier than my quiz, I think.
Yeah,
Now, when I took it, and I've told this story before, when I took it, I didn't know there was a study guide. There were no study groups,
Yeah.
and I just went and took it cold. And I just barely passed, but I did pass.
Yeah.
So even taking it cold, you know, if you've worked in the field for a while, you pick a lot of this stuff up.
So I took it cold except for the telephone. So Linda McKelvey was CenturyLink. I was not the nut and bolts gal, as you guys know. I am not a technology person. And I said, you're gonna have to explain this whole central office selective router thingy majigger. And we had her come, she came to Grand Junction for an afternoon, and she talked to us for like 4 hours. And I studied all those notes, and I took the test cold. I did nothing else. Because the rest of the concepts, you already know. That's why I said, you will be amazed already what you know.
We took part of a practice test last time, and I was actually really surprised how much of it I knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daryl's gonna,
Solidified what I didn't know.
Well,
put
yeah,
that
I
on
did do
the
that.
site, some of that stuff,
Okay.
so we have access, or you can.
Good.
Yeah, no, the practice test that Carl had last time, I don't think I could put that on the website for copyright issues, but I can email it to you.
Okay, if you would, please. And do you have all of our addresses, Darryl, or do we?
Are all of you getting, do all of you get the